Hello everyone, and welcome to our next Mind 444 lab session in which we will study psychrometry, which is concerned with the behavior of moisture in air. Professor Kosis has already presented a comprehensive lecture on psychrometry to you. We're not going to repeat the technical details of that in these videos, but you will be looking into some of those details in your analysis. We're going to use the experimental apparatus behind me, which we call the psychrometry unit, but its actual name is called the recirculating air conditioning unit. It's one of these wonderful test stands that Pierre purchased from Britain in about the 1980s, and it allows for a wide variety of measurements for studying fluid mechanics and thermodynamic cycles. We are just going to be looking at dry bulb and wet bulb temperatures, however, as the airflow in the unit makes its way from the inlet to the outlet, passing through various test sections as it goes, and we can perform various operations on the flow at those test sections. Now at this point, it would be really helpful if you were able to print out the data sheet handout, which you should have received via email by now, or if not the whole handout, at least the second page, which looks like this. This is a schematic of the psychrometry unit, and it will really help your understanding of it if you can follow along with the schematic. It's really a confusing unit, very unusual design. I've honestly never seen anything quite like this. I'm first going to talk about how the air flows through the unit without moving the camera at all, and I'll reference the schematic here. Then we'll talk about where you're going to be taking the temperature readings and what happens in between those stations. And then I'll take the camera off the tripod and we'll look in a little bit more detail at the close-ups of the unit. Okay? So the air flows into the psychrometry unit from the upper right-hand side here. Same thing on your schematic. Then it immediately flows downward through a bend through a static flow mixer, and then bends horizontal again at the bottom. So we go in from right to left, then down, and continue from right to left. It goes through another static mixer here. It goes through an electric preheating element here. It goes through a steam injection manifold. Then it goes through a cooling unit in this region. There is an electric element reheater in this region. And then you probably can't see this well in the video, but there's a fan at the lower left corner of the unit. Then the air flows upward and makes another bend to flow horizontally, now from left to right. And finally the air exits the unit in the middle of it through a damper here. The damper can be either left wide open so that there's no recirculation, or we can partially close it to get recirculation. For most of our tests, it's going to be in the wide open position, so there will be no recirculation. Now, we're going to be recording temperature at 5 different stations. These are labeled A through E, and at each station, we're going to record dry bulb and wet bulb temperatures. These are displayed via thermocouples, which are electrical devices for measuring temperature. I'll probably prepare a separate handout for those or discuss them in a future video segment. So the first station is at the inlet here, station A. The second station is below the first static mixer, station B. The third station is downstream from the electric preheater and the steam injection manifold, that's C. The fourth station, D, is located downstream from the cooling unit. And then we go through the reheater, the fan, up again, and then finally the last station, E, is close to the exit from the unit. So again, at each place we're going to record dry bulb and wet bulb temperatures. Let me take the camera off and we'll look in a little more detail here. So again, here is the inlet, and here is station A. I'll talk about the, well, we'll just show you. So here is the dry bulb thermocouple, and then the wet bulb thermocouples have wells for water, which we inject through a squirt bottle, and then there's a wick here, just like we have for the sling psychrometer that most of you have used for our previous lab sessions. So since the air is flowing past the wet wick, it cools off that thermocouple and we get the wet bulb temperature, very similar. So we go down through the static mixing blade here, okay? There's station B, dry bulb, wet bulb. Here is the second mixer. You can see the vanes on it, so stationary vanes that just impart some rotation to the flow to mix it. Here is the preheater, so electric element there. Hard to see, sorry, a little bit dark. There is a steam injection manifold, so this is connected to a boiler which we can control. There is a refrigeration unit, so flowing through the evaporator there. Again, there's station D. There is the reheater, electric elements. Here is the fan. And then this section you probably couldn't see in the previous part of the video, but the air just flows up vertically, bends horizontally again. There's station E. And then finally here is the discharge duct, the damper. So this is the fully open position, which we'll do most of the tests in, and then we can close it partially to look at the effect of recirculation. A lot of the instrumentation on this we are not going to use. Here are control switches for the preheaters, the boilers, the refrigeration unit, and the reheater. We're not going to use the voltmeter or the ammeter. We're not going to look at any of the refrigeration parameters here. Mostly we're going to be looking at the temperatures from the thermocouples, and we read those simply by turning this dial, and the relevant unit will be displayed there. So here is our guide to which temperatures we'll be recording. So right now it's recording station A, dry bulb. So that's 22.6 degrees. Turn this one turn clockwise. Now we're recording station A, wet bulb, and it's 11.4 degrees. By the way, all the temperatures are in degrees Celsius, which is different from what we've been doing previously. Finally, I do want to talk about the fan. This is the fan speed control. The fan is very noisy when it's at high speed. So what I'm going to do is turn it down to low speed when I'm talking and we're recording measurements. Turn it to low speed, but then it's going to run at high speed in between measurements so that the airflow will equilibrate. I'll next talk about the tests we're going to run really quickly. In the first test, we're just going to take all the temperature readings as they are. We're not going to do any preheating or steam injection or cooling. So that's test number 1. In test number 2, we are going to turn on the preheater only. So that's an electric resistance heating element. And we'll look at the effect of that on all the temperatures. Spoiler alert, it's probably not going to change the inlet temperatures very much, A and B, but it's going to increase the temperatures downstream from it. For test number 3, we're going to turn off the preheater, but we'll turn on the boilers. So we're going to be injecting moisture into the airflow, and that's it. We'll see what effect that has on those downstream temperature reading stations. For the next test, we'll turn on the cooler, and we will also leave the steam injection running. Okay, so we are injecting steam, then cooling the flow. We will take the temperature readings. And then test number 5, we will turn on the reheater while we're keeping the cooler on and the steam injection, and look at that effect. And then the final test, test number 6, we are going to close the damper so we will get some flow recirculation, and we will see what effect that has on everything. And we will probably get some condensation occurring at the evaporator for the cooling unit, because we're going to build up a lot more moisture in there because of the recirculation, and we will probably get some condensation occurring out of that tube into that jug. So we will see if we see that. Okay, so that's a quick introduction and tour of the unit. The next segment we'll look at the data sheet. Again, we'll email this to you. It's going to have the data filled out already, and it will have copies of the psychrometric chart for you to fill in, which we'll discuss. And then we will start taking measurements.